So hi, we've got tonight we've got Dr. Elizabeth Moran. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Steve.
So it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you. I know that you and I have spoken in the past, and we've had some really fascinating conversations. And I think your area of expertise is really going to resonate with the community. I think you've got some really fascinating views on things, and I can't wait to get talking on this because I think your perspective is quite unique and very authentic. And as I say, will really resonate with people. So just a quick intro. I know that you're a former exec. You were previously, your last role was ADP, I think, in the corporate world,
Yes,
VP of
exactly.
um,
And global leadership development. So I was
brilliant.
responsible for individual leader development, team development, and organizational development. So that involved coaching or doing training or helping an organization's leadership team through a change, and how do they get people to adopt it. Hence sort of a lot of my focus on the change and specifically leading through change.
Brilliant. And I know that you're also a clinical psychologist as well,
Yes,
and an author, and now
yes.
a leadership coach around transformation.
Yes, yes. So
Yes.
I have a growth mindset, and it's kept me curious and busy. So yeah, I felt sort of all there's overlap in all of these things, and yet they're a little bit different. But they're all coming together in a area that I'm really excited about, which is really to help people ultimately. I mean, I think that's why you do what you do, right? We want to help people create the conditions where they can be their best. And so, in the work that I'm doing within the corporate world, it's mostly doing executive coaching and or working with leadership teams or their organizations on helping them kind of drive more successful changes in their organizations. And that includes both helping them with, I've whittled it down as much as I possibly can about what are some of the basic things as an organization you can do and provide your leaders so that they will have a better chance of leading their people through a change, particularly one that might be a little more difficult for people
Okay,
to take on board.
fascinating. Very interesting. I just one thing that I noticed, and I'm sure it's prevalent everywhere, and it's just I guess it's the elephant in the room question. It feels like the rate of change is just accelerating off the scale day by day. I don't know whether it's just me, but that's my perception, and certainly a lot of people that I speak to. Um, what's going on in the world? What's your perception? What's happening?
Well, I think most
Maybe
people
we'll
are.
just sorry, maybe we'll kind of narrow that scope down to the corporate world, perhaps. I think that was a bit of a too open a question.
No, I think, listen, I think there has always been change, right? We know this. That's just the nature of life. And I think you've got a couple of circumstances coming together. You have us all being more connected through technology. And as a result of being more connected, trends happen faster. People pick up on things faster, whether it's good or bad, oftentimes remains to be seen. A lot of people just jump on board with that. I think you have different businesses, different industries are having more disruption, and so the organizations that are already in those businesses are trying hard to remain relevant, so trying to change. And then I think the larger the organization is, the more challenging it is because it's a bigger ship and you have multiple little changes and then big changes. And so yes, you're absolutely right, and 100% of my clients are feeling this. And I'm not sure, still not sure, after all these years and all this practice we humans have had with change, I'm not really sure the basics have changed in terms of to do it well. And I'm still hearing that fundamentally there's just a lot of missing links within organizations and how people do it that are still really not very helpful. So hence, I'd love to say more job security, I guess, I hope for me in the future. But yes, so that's all of these things are coming together, and there you have it. And yet I think people still ultimately struggle with some of the basics when they lead others through change that make it harder for themselves and their people. And then, not only do you have never just one change, right? There's usually multiple changes. There's changes that are multi-year changes. And I remember one of the clients I worked with, she said it perfectly. She's like, you want to tell your people we have a change that is a change from how we've been doing it, but this change will change as we change. And that's
Right.
kind of
Okay.
funny, but
A lot of change.
but it's kind of true,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. And how specifically do you work with clients to help them navigate this change? Are you able to kind of give some examples of some of the conversations that you might have with clients?
Sure. So so a lot of what I'm doing now is been more focused around the book. So simply put, when I describe change leadership, and as I say to clients, I couldn't care if you called it change leadership or change management. It doesn't matter to me, and usually doesn't matter to my clients. So I call it change leadership. So where I have tended to focus of late, and it's based on the book, is that regardless of what your organization might be doing well in terms of leading and managing a change, it's a practical handbook for leaders, really to help them understand a couple of concepts. One is the neuroscience. So I take 5 concepts. I try to keep it really simple and help people understand that resistance is normal to change. Even when we're the architects of a change, it can still be difficult. It's even more difficult when a change is imposed, which is typically how it happens in organizations. A change comes down from on top, on high, or some other part of the organization, and it's a change that you as a leader have to lead through that neither you nor your team initiated, which makes it even harder. So one of my mentors said to me, Elizabeth, when is change a good idea? And I do what I normally do. I overthought it. I'm like, well, when, blah, 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 strategy changes or blah, blah, circumstances change. And he said, when it's your idea. So change is best when it's our own idea. And even then, as I said, it's still difficult. So what I've tried to do is take the emotional side of change, break that down into some very simple concepts, and then in the book I give specific actions, and including conversation guides for the 3 toughest questions you might get as a leader with a change. So that really is, when you think about an organization, the heads of an organization can't possibly reach every person. So this is a tool in a book to help people leaders actually take that change message forward, make it more particular and more relevant for their team so that their team understands, okay, now what do I have to do differently on a day-to-day basis as a result of the change? And that's ultimately what we're trying to answer. So you have the people aspect of change. And then the other part of my work, which really isn't so much in the book, but is part of some of the consulting work that I do, is with executives, where executive teams, I will come in and speak to the CEO or the head of HR or the leadership head of a particular, a president of a business. And so, for instance, I worked with the head of international sales at a large company, and we worked together for about a year and a half. But we started, with him, sort of helping him understand, again, what are some of the basic things you all can do as a leadership team to help your leaders and people through change. So that might be, what's your communication plan? Do you have an easy change message that everybody can see, so everybody understands what's changing, why, what happens if we don't change? Also, we might do a scope, so getting even the leadership team aligned on, well, this is a big change. Well, what's the impact of this change on our people or culture? Or what's the impact of this change on our clients? So there are some project things you can do with change that I consult on. And again, I've whittled it down to the basics because I've never met a leader who actually has time to do all of the full things that they should do. So it's a couple of things in a particular order. And then I have the supporting work to actually develop the people leaders so they understand what's your role as a change leader. So for instance, even though this might be like, well, duh, like your job is not to make people change. And for a lot of leaders, it's like, oh, right. But so then what is your role? And so I talk about your role is to make sure that change is understood, that your role is to raise any obstacles or challenges that people have. Your role is to make sure your people understand, again, what they need to do differently on a day-to-day basis. So you are almost the go-between, as the leader between the organization and actually change implementation. So the project elements and the people elements are kind of what I've tried to simplify and then provide these tools to organizations. So yes, I have a ton of other stories, but I think hopefully that gives you kind of
It does,
the
yeah.
basics.
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, at Navigate the Curve as well, we have a specific interest in mental health as well, and I know that you have a background in clinical psychology. What are some of the mental health challenges that you're seeing, and are they, would you say that they're specific to the change that's going on in the corporate world? Would you think they're quite situational, or do you think it's just a case that we're just more focused on and aware of our mental health at the moment, and that's why we're maybe seeing, more cases of people struggling with their mental health?
Yes, I think, again, it's a confluence of factors. I do think fundamentally something changed in 2020 and something that impacted the globe. And I think that was the first time for many people who are on the planet now where something like that happened. I think for many people, the world became a more scary place, and people then became more isolated. So I think the good news is a spotlight has been shined or is shining on this topic. The bad news is again, I think we're still struggling to figure out how do we support people. So I think you have that. So I think something is different than it was, and I think the good news is it's not as stigmatized. And I think many people had experiences, even if you hadn't. The level of stress has definitely increased, and I know you're seeing this too. And I do think, again, it is more prevalent, and I think and the good news is more people, I think, feel, I don't even know if it's the word is comfortable talking about it. Maybe it's tolerating the discomfort of talking about it better, and acknowledging that people are struggling and that stress has a physical impact on the body. And yeah, so I think that this is one of the biggest challenges that many people are facing. And I think many people just tried to push through, but as I think the pace increases and more happens and the stress is increasing, I think more and more people are needing greater support and ways to manage it, because the old ways aren't working so well anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I do recognize all of those things that you commented on there, and I do feel like there's a big kind of change in not just people's mental health, but the way that people think about work and then their lives in general. Do you think that these kind of changing views on life and career and work-life balance is actually having an effect? It's being taken on board by the corporate world and is kind of changing corporate culture, or do you think it's going to be a case of us kind of just trying to find a way just to stay in that robust corporate framework that's already always existed?
I think that is such a good question. I have some thoughts. I'm actually curious about what you're hearing or seeing, and then I'm happy to share some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know whether I have a bit of a one-dimensional perspective, given the fact that I work with a lot of people who have burnout and anxiety, and a lot of those people typically it can be quite situational, so it can be related to the environment that they're in, and some will stay in that environment, some will make a slight tweak and maybe do something different but within the same organization or industry, and then others will look to do something completely different. In terms of organizations kind of adjusting to that, I think that it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, if you look at what a business is, I mean, it's a collection of people and processes ultimately, and it's driven by profit or shareholder value. When it comes down to it, that's king. I guess it depends on the people that you report into as to your experience of that specific business as well. So that can vary greatly. You know, there are some amazing people in the business world who are certainly very empathetic to people's situations, and they're more than happy to help. It's probably a bit of a difficult question. I know it was my question, wasn't it? So it's a bit of a difficult one to answer. I think kind of taking the you know, trying to answer it myself.
Well,
but
I think
yeah, I
you're
mean, that would be
talking
my
about these big, like, I mean, I don't listen. So my perspective is, and so you and I talked about this. This is sometimes can be an awkward thing to talk about, but I am very clear with my clients. So I talk about, you know, to me, organizations for the most part, and the organizational model is broken. And it doesn't mean that just because it's broken, it doesn't mean that good things can still happen and things can be done. I think part of it is this idea of people, one, managing their expectations about truly what this is. And sometimes I don't think corporations help themselves, because they talk about themselves as cultures that are kind and friendly and that are trying to create an empathetic environment. And a part of me, I appreciate that, but I do wonder, it almost is like you have to have an asterisk there. There's a caveat, as you said, because it is a business.
Yeah.
So that's one. And I do think still oftentimes the financial needs and the human needs are still in conflict, primarily because we operate in a world where success is still measured by profitability, at least, you know, for the most part, quarter by quarter. And until organizations, and I think it's changing a little bit, but I think it's still going to take a long time, until organizations are rewarded for great cultures, and that potentially their profits didn't go up, maybe they didn't go down, but they can show how they invested in community, or they showed how they invested, you know, in their people as part of the service profit chain, right? Your people are happy, you're more likely to get happy, you know, clients or customers. But I think there's still kind of a tenuous connection there. So what I am finding is, as financial pressures go up, right, the organizations still default to that. And then this concept of doing more with less, that's become a thing now, which when you really think about it, is crazy. It's stupid. Like, most of the technology that people want to use that would make people's jobs easier is still cumbersome, or it's still not fully there. So people end up getting so much more to do and feeling like there's still not great ease in being able to do their jobs. So in other words, so many of the clients I'm talking to, it sounds like similar to you, are feeling completely overwhelmed. So one of the first things we begin to talk about is separating out somebody's sense of self-worth or value from their ability to get it all done. Because as I say, since organizations are broken, people and organizations are a bottomless pit of need, right? It will never be enough. And I think logically people get that, but then when they really start to understand how painful and stress inducing it is not to get everything done for certain people, that's very painful. So it's not until you have to work at that, right? Because if it's something's left undone, or this idea of good enough, right? You know how many people struggle with perfectionism, which is just, on the one hand, there's this healthy root in that of caring enough and wanting to do it well, but it's been kinked, and then it becomes this taskmaster and this thing your ego does to you that's constantly holding over your head, that it's never good enough, it's never good enough. And then that just continues to build stress, and over time that's what leads to burnout. And so what I try to do is help people understand, right, what is you and what is not you. In other words, what is not in your control. And you might not like it, but you're the only one who can change your perspective on that. So part of it, again, is is having a different way to understand and measure my success. And my success is not, or my sense of value or self-worth is not based on how people react to my output. It's always great when somebody loves what I do, right? That feels great. But when somebody doesn't love what I do, and I really did the best I could with that information, then I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I used to when I was younger, but now, which a lot of people still do, and what I try to tell folks is it's a slight nuance here. Your energy becomes focused instead on, oh gosh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you didn't like that, or that didn't satisfy your needs. That's okay. Help me understand why, instead of, oh my gosh, I'm so bad. I screwed up. I blah, 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 blah. So what I say to people is, sure, you can feel uncomfortable or disappointed that it didn't meet the mark. But truly, if you did the best you could with the information you had at the time, then okay. Yeah, it's disappointing, but that doesn't make you bad or wrong. And this is a global thing. I talk to clients all across the world, and we all somehow got the memo at some point growing up that if we didn't know how to do something and we couldn't do it great right away, there was something wrong with us, which is crazy. It's like, yeah, I'd love to be a concert pianist, right? But yeah, I don't know how to play the piano. So if I try to play the piano, am I going to go out there and like beat myself up because all of a sudden I can't do it? No, right? But it's the same thing. If you did your best, disappointing, wish it was better, but you spend your energy not on going in circles and thinking about how bad you are. You then in the moment figure out, okay, what do we want to do about this? Gosh, I'm sorry. Here's what I thought. Let's take a look. Did we have the same goals in mind? Did we have the same facts? Do we go about doing the work different? Is it just that we have different methodologies that didn't hit the mark? And that's where you spend your energy.
That's
That's
fascinating.
a long answer to your question, I think.
Yeah, no, but it's really fascinating. It's amazing how it's not amazing actually. It's we build so much of our a sense of self around our career, don't we? When there's so many
Yes.
different pillars in our life that are important to us, family, your finances, health, everything, all of those different pillars. Yet typically career tends to be that one thing that we put so much emphasis on. And when things aren't going well with our career, or when inevitably it comes to an end, when we retire or we get made redundant, it can really destroy our whole sense of
It
worth.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
Mm.
I mean, if you think about it, right, how we have all been raised, it's how this world has operated for thousands of years. For so long, we've been taught, and it starts in your education system, that everything as a value kind of exists outside of you. You kind of go after it or achieve this or do that. And that
Yeah.
is all well and good. But the shadow side and the downside of that, and the heavy price we have all paid, that our internal state of peace has been so dependent on what's happening around us. And that is the fundamental shift that needs to happen for people to, at least it's been in my own life, is I am responsible for my internal state of peace. That means that any situation I have created, I take 100% responsibility for, even if on the surface it would seem like I'm a victim. So for me, from a holistic, spiritual, universal perspective, it's radical self-responsibility, which is very hard for people, I should say, to get our egos to get around that, right? Because we'll say we're responsible for the good stuff. When the bad stuff comes, we're like, oh no, I'm the victim. It's that person's fault. Well, no, everything, there is no asterisk. So that's kind of part one. This is what sort of the change that I really made in my life about 4 years ago when I started this business. And I left the corporate world, but I realized I needed time also, that the things I said I believed in, spiritually, whatever the types of principles you want to call it, I still wasn't living my life according to those things. And that's really the shift that's been happening. So now I 100% believe it is possible for me to almost be imagine me being in a rowboat in the middle of a storm and everything is raging around me and I could feel complete peace.
It's amazing. Yeah.
That concept was foreign to me. And now it's like, no, that is absolutely possible. It doesn't mean that I won't have discomfort, but I realized so often, you know, my mood was so dependent on whether, again, somebody liked me or liked what I did, or I got validation, which again is always nice. But then when I didn't get that, my sense of self, my self-doubt, my confidence would plummet. And no, like we can never control what anybody does with what we think we've done a great job. Somebody doesn't like it. So now it's like, okay, you don't have to like it. That's cool. That's fine. And if we're working together, hopefully we can figure out a way through and you can tell me why, but I'm still okay. Even if, you know, which sometimes is hard. Like I said, it's great when people love us and agree with us and give us accolades, and we should take it in. That's great. But as an extra, not as the only source of our sense of self. But this is a really, really hard one to unlearn. And most people are unlearning this. I think that's part of what's happening now. And part of what this great change is, and that's the, you know, people, whether it's a bunch of people leaving the corporate world and never going back and figuring out what they want to do. I mean, these changes, these trends are happening. So yeah, it's fascinating.
As you're talking there, I very much identified with what you're saying. I mean, I came from a sales background. I think I've mentioned that before, tech sales. So you kind of live or die by the number. But that sense of worth is tied on whether you know, there's only, I can say it now because I'm not in the sales world. There's only so much control you have over a deal. You can do.
Yes.
There's only so much you can do, and ultimately, you can't get fully into the brain of a. You can't make them sign a piece of paper for you. So, you know, if you
Mm-mm.
don't get that deal in, or you don't hit that number, then it can feel like your whole world's collapsing. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be. But I love that
Yes.
concept of taking ownership of everything, all of the good and bad. I don't know whether you read much on the Stoic philosophers, but
Oh yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
got a
So
piece in the book on that too, Marcus Aurelius. Yeah.
oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I love yeah, I love the philosophies and the, you know, the concept of accepting things, good or bad, and treating both the same. So not getting overly excited when things go well, and not getting overly, you know, depressed or down when things don't go so well. Trying, you know, stay relatively consistent with everything. I really love that idea. But I really like the idea as well of taking control of your career, and I think Charles Handy, I might have mentioned to you before. I was really lucky to have a one-on-one conversation with Charles Handy, and I kind of, well, he was really the guy who inspired me on the concept for building Navigate the Curve and his second
Yeah.
curve philosophy. But he talked a lot about, he coined the phrase portfolio careers, and he spoke a long time ago about the concept of people not staying in one corporation for the whole of their lives, but having, you know, doing bits and pieces. Maybe you know, you could be a copywriter, and maybe you could be a dog sitter, and maybe you could also be a therapist. You know, all of these different things. And I love the idea of being fully in charge of your own destiny. And I always thought that would be the way things were going. I know in the tech world, it seems like some of the tech giants, so the Googles and the Facebooks of this world, they have these huge campuses, and everything. It's kind of like your whole life is just brought into these campuses. So you have someone doing your dry cleaning, you can stay there, and you have all of your meals provided. And it's almost like taking over that part of your life. Is there a danger in being too tied to a specific organization and not having control over your destiny? Or do you think that's just do you think that's a fair choice that some people can make, and it's not? Yeah.
I think like everything, it depends, and it probably depends on where you're at in your life and what you're willing to do. I mean, I think like everything, and I think this is one of the reasons I enjoy having conversations, because there never has been one right way for anybody. And then, even what could be perfect for a period of time then shifts. I mean, you know, there may have been a time when you were happy and things were going well in your sales world and it worked, and then a number of things shifted. And part of that is, I think we're still, and I understand, right? We talk about from a neuroscience perspective, our brain hates uncertainty
Yeah.
more than anything. So here is physical beings. We are still physically grounded in a quite a primitive body and a very literal organ of the brain. And that's challenging, because for folks who want to dream and we love the flexibility and maybe we'd love to do a variety of things, it is not easy to do, to kind of structure that. And depending on, right, how you grew up, did you have the support that you needed? So you've got some of these fundamental structures in place. Do you have financial support? Some people have more freedom with that than other people. And all of this by way of saying there are no accidents, right? People are exactly where they need to be. And so that's the first step. So no matter what's happening in my life, first thing for me is to take full responsibility, which again, the hardest thing to do. And it doesn't mean that other people don't behave badly. And it doesn't mean that it's quote unquote fair, right? But that's the first step. Once you do that, and until you do that, it's very hard to tune into yourself to figure out what circumstance or situation would be best for me. So to your point, to be able to decide, do I want to be in corporate? Can I stay in corporate? So much depends on your mindset and the guardrails you have around it, and the place that it has in your life. And most people bump up against a challenge with this in one way or another, oftentimes because of circumstances that may change in their lives. And all of a sudden things change, or you all of a sudden get a new boss. Everything could have been going great. You love your work, you're the golden child, and then you get a new boss, and then everything goes to shit, excuse my language, right? And so I think those are these things. And to that point, that's when we say it's scary to be it's scary to be human and try to get through this life, right? It's not for the faint of heart. But I think to find some basic wisdom that helps people understand themselves and their brilliance and their magnificence, regardless of what's happening, to try to spend time on what would bring me joy. And most people don't even get that far, you know, just be able to have some space to think about purpose and joy, and then having the courage oftentimes to make those changes to try to make those things possible. And there isn't one way to do it at all. And so I have tremendous respect for anybody at any point. This is why I think we love what we do. It's so honoring when somebody, no matter where they are on the journey, recognizes that how they've been living or doing their life, something isn't working anymore, and that they have the courage to say, hey, I think I maybe need to learn a different way or do it differently. So again, I've once again veered way off of your question, but I think so much of it, there isn't just one thing or one way that works for people.
Completely resonates with me. And you were saying about, I really love that idea that everyone's in the place that they're supposed to be in this point in time. And as you're saying that, you know, I reflect on my sales career, and there's, you know, it was the right thing for me at that time. I started in my early 20s, and I finished kind of mid 40s, and I met some amazing people. I got to travel all over the world. I got to live in a part of the country which I'd never would have lived in before if it hadn't been for that career. And I, you know, financially, I made a certain amount of money which enabled me to take more risks later on in life. So perhaps it's a case that, you know, different stages in life require different things, and things are, you know, as you say, there's
Exactly.
different places that we need to be. So a bit of an abstract question. You're going to have to forgive me. It's just the way I think. So feel free to send this question back at me if it's a bit too abstract. I have this concept. I know obviously everyone's talking about AI at the moment. So the fast tracking of AI, and it's going to completely change our worlds and make us all redundant and everything, destroy the planet, whatever it's going to do. Obviously, AI will be able to, in its early stages, will be able to replicate all of the easy processes, all of the kind of, the processy kind of things that we don't need to give a lot of thought to. And those parts of the job can be done by AI, and maybe some roles will be made redundant. People will be able to retrain. But I have this belief that the rollout of AI will increase the demand for authentic thinking. So it will increase the demand for creativity, for the more human side. So being able to the skills of being able to connect with people, to be able to interact one-on-one, be more intuitive about people, and then I mentioned the creative angle as well. Obviously, as my kind of training in the neuroscience and the work that I do with clients on a day-to-day basis, so I know that those kind of skills come from a place of feeling good about ourselves, feeling mentally healthy. I just wonder if you have any thoughts around, well, first of all, would you agree with me that those kind of skills and those kind of areas would be more sought after with a rollout of AI? And if they are, should we be giving more thought to our mental health and how we work with our minds, given the fact that our minds work better in these areas when we're feeling good about ourselves?
Oh gosh, great.
I did apologize beforehand on that question.
No, it's
Yeah.
a great, listen, it's a great question, but like everything, and if we go back in history, even predictions people were making about what would happen to the planet if we didn't change XYZ in 5 years or whatever, right? So I think given the knowledge that we have in this moment, we then take that and superimpose that onto the future and what it will be. So, which we really have no idea about. That said, what I believe is happening now is these things, the human race, our consciousness is raising at the same time AI is also raising. Because our consciousness is raising, this is one of the reasons the old systems are breaking down. So if you look at all of early history, so many of these systems that were in place to organize humanity or quote unquote serve humanity were really all based on systems of control, right? So humans had to be controlled. So whether that's borders, governments, police, military, right? There's the sense of everything is right based on kind of the lowest common denominator, and this idea of how many people were trained or raised, but it's dying now, it's a dead idea, is I only am successful or powerful when I control other people or I have power over other people. I think that is the fundamental thing that is now shifting. Technology is helping that people can become more autonomous in little and big ways. Many people, given their experiences over the last several years, got a close-up look at parts of their lives that they weren't satisfied with anymore. And so they were making a change in how do I want to live my life, because I don't want to live my life under the control of other people. I don't want to live my life in fear all the time for the next disaster. And I think it's become very apparent how the quote unquote messages that get broadcast are very orchestrated and oftentimes manipulated. And so I think many people are seeing through that and they're saying, I want to be the authority of myself. So how do I develop those things in myself? So that's where you get to the capacity. So first of all, people have to realize that they have this amazing, brilliant, magnificent, creative potential in themselves. Our educational system does a really bad job in the US at least of helping people tap into that, learning about this magnificent being that they are, learning to love yourself and grow and focus on strengths, right? There's so much neuroscience that supports that. So I do think the more people are going to continue to tune into that, when you shift and change something in yourself, and it could be as simple as all of a sudden your perspective shifts and you can see that it changes everything. So I think human consciousness is expanding at a rate faster than it ever has at any point in history. And as it expands, it's just exponential. So whilst there's this idea now that certain tasks will be redundant and technology can take over, for sure, but I think for most people that's a good thing, and we should be doing tasks, and there will be other things that will still come up, right? That will be other possibilities that get created because of that we don't even know now. And I believe, as you can imagine, AI advancing to the point, right, where it could, let's just imagine, have a therapy conversation with somebody. That would still be based at this point on looking at an algorithm or words, which are amazing. It could detect through maybe word usage or different things, depression. It could detect anxiety and give people some basic support or help, and maybe even further than that, which would be wonderful in terms of access, that more people would have access to that. But the fundamental difference is our consciousness will always be expanding faster than any AI, because we have only tapped into still this small bit. But this is the thing, because everything is energy, and we are all going to, like I said, talk to you like I've known you forever. If everything is energy, we are all connected. It is all one. And so whenever anybody expands and grows, it affects everything. And these are concepts most people don't understand right now. And I'm still trying. I'm not saying I understand it all, but I'm understanding the limitless nature of consciousness and our ability to not just be creatures who feel at the mercy of our environment and get to the point where we can react well to what's happening. What people are just starting to understand is our ability to then use that power to create something different in our external world. I mean, one-on-one, we're all trying to do that, but consciousness, using our power to fundamentally change what happens, we're just starting to understand our capability. So whilst you can look at the current human processing time and stuff and look at AI and we seem like we're going to fall behind, I don't buy into that. But I think the technology is amazing and can be used very well. And a lot of it depends on the consciousness of the people who are creating that. So if you're still in what I call 3D consciousness, which is duality, it's win-lose, it's I have to control your power view, then AI is scary, right? But if you're in I want to contribute my best, I want this technology to enable all people to be their best, and it gets created and used in that way, which again, I have a feeling it's going to be used in both ways. And it's just going to be up to us humans to, stand up and say, no, thank you. Right. But as you know, humans, we learn the hard way or the harder way. And oftentimes it's the harder way.
We do, don't we? It's fascinating as you're talking there. I was actually, I was approached by an AI startup to automate me actually, and to turn me into an online therapist. And I, as much as commercially appealing it would be, I wouldn't have an hourly rate. For me, that just would never work because,
Why?
the interactions that,
yeah.
the interactions that I have with clients, it's more than just words and just being an automatic response. It's being intuitive. It's understanding. It's like human connection.
It's the emotional connection. It's the heart,
exactly,
which AI won't have. And I think that's what we're understanding is now the connection between the brain and the heart, and the intelligence that is in the heart, right? And the power of that, and for people to feel you, as you said, and that is what we're understanding is the key to manifestation, right? So it's not just thinking I'd like this and let me imagine this. It is let me feel into this vision that I have, Let me imagine the people I'm working with and what they're experiencing, the joy they're experiencing, or a relationship I might be looking for. Let me imagine doing things with this person and how are we feeling? How are we engaging with each other? It's the feeling component that you're really onto something there, because that is different.
Yeah,
That is the difference.
100%. I'm totally in agreement with you on that. I love the way you articulated it. It was very kind of reassuring as well, that you've kind of brought together all of my thoughts I haven't been able to bring together into a, to being able to articulate them. And I really, really love that idea. Um, okay, so just I could talk to you for hours, as always. It's so fascinating.
Me
Um,
too.
one last question. So I know that your focus is on the corporate world, but for those outside of the corporate world who are going through change or who are looking to maybe make the jump from the corporate world and make some significant changes in their life, from the perspective of the coaching that you do, but also from the neuroscience and the psychological perspective, do you have any advice for people who who help them navigate change in their everyday lives?
Well, I think the first piece is simply is really, I think everything starts with self-awareness and compassion through the awareness process. I got to say, I'm still learning. I mean, I'm 57, right? And I've been doing this a long time. I'm still understanding when people say being, self-compassion and compassion, because I would be like, yeah, I get it. Like, okay, I got to be nice to myself, or self-compassion. But I really didn't fully understand how important that was. And not from a couple of standpoints. One, if I'm not being harsh or judgmental of myself, it is more possible for me to just spend some time and explore what might be those things that would bring me joy without jumping quick to judgment about would it work or would it not work, right? It's just creating some space. That's one thing. Also, when you do make a change or anybody makes a change, it's again understanding that your brain, for the most part, doesn't like it. And so if you bump up against fatigue or challenges as you're doing this, or fear, understanding, okay, this is normal. It's a normal part of the process. And even though it's normal, it doesn't mean it's comfortable. I have lost everything 3 times in my life. So when I first was starting off in corporate, and then I was married and we moved to California and I started my graduate work, and I got divorced, I was broke, went completely broke, lost everything, lived that way for a long time. Then came back, graduated, came back, had a series of successful jobs and Lehman Brothers, right? And so I went to Lehman Brothers and I was there 2006 to 2008. And I just started to get out of like school debt and stuff like that. I mean, I still have a student loan. And then I lost everything again, right? And so it's like, okay. And but those things did give me the opportunity to reflect back and to say, well, what did I do during these things that served me and what didn't? And so much of that was understanding my anxiety and then getting really interested in a lot of the neuroscience and understanding, like, I want to go through this better, but and it was so then it was, what are the practices I can engage in? And so much of it starts with really understanding that our brains don't like change, that our brains lie to us. They set us up to automatically give more weight to the negative. So whenever you're wanting to make a change or do something, it starts with self-awareness, making space for yourself, being kind when things don't go so well, having a really good support network. That's the other thing that came up. I realized I felt ashamed and embarrassed to ask for help, because deep down there was a belief that if I asked for help, that means I screwed up in the first place. If I wouldn't need help if I had done it right. So even though I thought I'd done a lot of work on being self-compassionate, there's always these little layers that, you know, it's what I grew up with. It's sort of the unthought known, right? It's like it's ruled my life, but I wasn't really conscious. So understanding when you go through these things, you are going to be afraid, and there's real important information there, but you do need to have a support system, because it is rough, and you could be quote unquote on the right track and still really struggling financially, and things may take time. So again, knowing yourself, what your North Star is, what your rudder is, what kind of, again, that's why it's got to be grounded in me and not necessarily on external conditions. And then, you know, with a little luck.
It's funny how some of these negative events are ultimately turn out to be the catalyst for real positive change. I mean, I reflect
Totally.
back on my life, and you know, the times that I've made the most significant change of being kicked off by, you know, quite negative events, sometimes tragic events. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's a beautiful thing that you just said. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could speak for hours, Elizabeth. It's been absolutely fascinating, and
Me
I'd love to have
too. Thank you.
another chat about this. But I could go off at so many different angles. I have to be really careful to keep it on point. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure
Me
speaking to you
too.
again, and thanks so much for spending the time to talk to the viewers today. It's been an incredible
Oh,
conversation.
as
Thanks
always,
again.
Stephen, it's a joy. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. It's really important. I appreciate you.
Likewise, thank you again.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening and happy Thanksgiving again.
You too. Thanks. Have a great one.